Chapter 36, Section 5, continued. Let's look at the economic impact of this attack on September 11th, 2001. If you're to look at the immediate physical damage, $25 billion. And on top of that, New York Stock Exchange closes for 4 days. That's the longest since 1914, when World War I breaks out. And then when it reopens, it's going to have one of its worst weeks in history, the worst since the Depression, with over $1 trillion lost. Airlines were struggling. They had like a 43% drop in passengers. Nobody felt safe to fly. The only reason the airlines could actually stay open was with a $15 billion package from Congress to keep them going. I mean, people were losing confidence in the economy, which was one of the goals of bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. Let's look at domestic security. It's after September 11th that you have the Office of Homeland Security formed. It's going to first be led by Tom Ridge, and they're going to coordinate the domestic national security efforts of the various government agencies. You know, you've got CIA, NSA, FBI, local police, you got all these different agencies, and it come to find out all had little pieces to the puzzle. And so Homeland Security is supposed to help put all the pieces together. One of the first threats that Homeland Security is going to have to deal with was anthrax. This powdered form of anthrax started showing up in the mail. Somebody was mailing it to people. U.S. Attorney General John Ashcroft is going to call for expanded law enforcement powers to help fight against terrorism. The thing is, you had to balance this with protecting people's civil liberties. And that's going to be a delicate balancing point. A lot of questions will be raised about that. Let's talk about the war on terrorism. Bush is going to be very much supported by his leaders here. You've got the Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, coordinating the military effort, and you've got Secretary of State Colin Powell, who is building support for this action in the world. Because Bush says we're waging war on terrorist organizations and on any nations that's supporting or protecting terrorists. I mean, he comes out and basically tells the world, either you're with us or you're with the terrorists. And he draws that line in the sand, and the world backed us. Overall, the world backed us in this fight against terrorism. And the government that's going to be singled out is going to be the Taliban. The Taliban is going to be this Islamic fundamentalist government in Afghanistan. Bin Laden was in Afghanistan, and they refused to turn him over. And we warned them what would happen if they kept on this line, and they refused to turn him over. And so begins Operation Enduring Freedom, October 7th, 2001, with us and Great Britain beginning airstrikes in Afghanistan, less than a month after the attacks on us. We're going to be helped out on the ground by the Northern Alliance, who had been fighting the Taliban since the early 90s. And on December 17th of 2001, the Taliban will be defeated and removed from power in Afghanistan, and 4 days later you're going to have a new government set up in Kabul. But what we did not have was Osama bin Laden. The Al-Qaeda leaders, the Taliban leaders, they went and they hid. They hid in the mountains along the border with Pakistan, some of the harshest landscape on the face of the earth. And so you're going to enter a period now where it was trying to find this leadership of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. So as the war in Afghanistan is slowing down, focus is to now turn towards Iraq. Because Saddam Hussein was still in power there and he was continuing to oppress his people. And he was refusing to cooperate with the UN inspectors. And actually in 98, Hussein had kicked the UN inspectors out of Iraq. And there is going to be suspected a program in Iraq that they were building weapons of mass destruction. And the CIA is going to warn Bush about this weapons of mass destruction program being built in Iraq. In October of 2002, Congress is going to vote and authorize Bush to use force against Iraq. And then the next month in November, Iraq decides to let the UN inspectors back in. And for 2 months, they look for these banned weapons and do not find them. But that doesn't mean they weren't there. It doesn't mean Hussein hadn't hid them, because Hussein was deliberately misleading the world. And you're looking back, you wonder why. Some people think maybe he was trying to, make Iraq's military look stronger than what they were. Some people think he was doing this as a ploy to make us look, not find them, and leave, and then he'll start building them. But here's the bottom line. Us in Great Britain were building troops and weapons in the Gulf. And Operation Iraq Freedom begins with airstrikes March 19th of 2003. And we start to hit Iraq. March 21st, troops were moving towards Baghdad, and by April 9th, Baghdad falls. May 1st, Bush declares major combat in Iraq is over. That does not mean the fight is over. It means the major combat to remove Saddam Hussein is over. Saddam Hussein was out of power, but we didn't have Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein is not going to be found until December 13th of 2003, basically hiding in a hole. It was an underground cellar. He's looking real rough there when he's found. And he is going to be turned over to Iraq for trial, to an Iraqi court, charged with crimes against humanity, as he had gassed Iraqi people and stuff like that in the past. And Iraq is going to hang him on December 30th of 2006. But the problem in Iraq is it basically erupted into a civil war. There are two major divisions in Iraq, the Shiite Muslims and the Sunni Muslims. And they don't agree with each other. And they're basically going to be fighting for power in Iraq now that Hussein was gone. You've got Al-Qaeda groups that were moving back in and becoming active, and other terrorist groups that came back in. And looking back, the ties to the war on terror are a little unclear. But the bottom line is we went in, a mess occurred, and we couldn't leave till we fixed the mess.